Hi, everyone, and welcome to SQM Picks. I'm David Lipton. For those of you new to SQM Picks, our company SQM first started a blog several years ago to highlight businesses that provide outstanding customer service. Businesses that have been featured range from small mom and pop companies to some of the larger international brands. Highlighted companies come from a number of different industries, including restaurants, retail stores, medical offices, lawyers, and various tourist attractions. We've also featured an auto body shop and a junkyard in the blogs, which just goes to prove that any businesses can provide outstanding service. Today, we're doing something a bit different with an extended version of SQM Picks. Our guest today is music and concert producer, dare I say legendary music and concert producer, Harvey Goldsmith. Over his career, Harvey has worked with some of the top acts and performers in the music industry, including Led Zeppelin, Genesis, Sting, Pink Floyd, the Eagles, Queen, U2, Elton John, and the list goes on. Perhaps more importantly than some of the bands is his involvement with charity concerts, including the Prince's Trust, and of course, our focus for today, Live Aid and the Band Aid Trust. Harvey is one of the trustees from the Band Aid Trust, which organized both the 1984 song organized by Sir Bob Geldof, Do They Know It's Christmas Time, and then a few months later, the Live Aid concert. I was first introduced to Harvey after attending the Toronto performance of the play Just for One Day, which is the story of how Live Aid came to be. Harvey, welcome to SQM Picks today.
Thank you and welcome.
Now, since we first arranged to talk to you, my mind has been spinning with some of the questions and items that I'd like to talk to you about. But for starters, have you seen the play yet?
Yes, I was in Toronto for the opening, and of course I was at for the original opening at the Old Vic in London.
Oh, God. Now, of course, you're better looking than the actor who portrays you in the play.
Yeah,
Tell me a little bit of what's that?
He's new. The original actor who did the Old Vic, unfortunately, he was the king in Hamilton, and he's on a long-term contract. But they gave him time off to do this originally, but they wouldn't give him any longer, so he's back in Hamilton.
Interesting. A play that I've loved to see here. It's so hard to get tickets to see Hamilton.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the Band Aid Trust, or perhaps more specifically, the small group known as the trustees.
Well, the trust was set up to obviously protect any donations that were given to us, and the Band Aid Trust is that there are 5 trustees. There've been 5. There were originally 6, but one passed away. Who are basically the trustees of all the money that's donated to Band Aid and the distribution of those funds. And we've been together for 40 years come July.
Now,
we only, if I may add, we set it up because we had to. You have to set up a charity to protect other people's money, donations. We thought we'd shut it down in 3 months. That was the plan.
40 years later, still going strong.
Yeah.
Now, the play seems to suggest that Bob, or Sir Bob, was truly horrified when he saw the television what was happening in Africa back in, I guess it was 1984. Was there a specific incident that resulted in him rallying the troops?
Yes. Basically, there was a journalist called Michael Burke who was on the 6 o'clock news. And as far as I know, for the first time in history on the 6 o'clock news, which is one of the main news periods, pictures were being shown of kids dying and people starving in Africa. And the debate of the day in Europe was what to do with fruit mountains and food mountains because they had so much excess. And down the road, here were thousands upon thousands of people dying. And it was very graphically shown by the interviewer. And that's really what triggered the whole project off.
Interesting. Now, the play also seemed to suggest that in addition to calling up his friends and colleagues to participate in the song initially, he also knocked on a lot of doors to convince radio stations to play the record. Is he that much of a salesperson?
Yes. Very determined.
Very, very good to hear. So the song comes out, rises up the charts, but as the play suggests, Bob felt that he had to do more. So he toddles into your office. What happens next?
Basically, what happened was he didn't want to, but because he felt it wasn't right to be spending money to go down to Africa. But the press insisted he went. and they went with him. And when he got there, he saw that the devastation was infinitely worse than what he was led to believe. And so he came back and started thinking about it. He's a musician. I mean, I promoted the Boomtown Rats, so that's how I knew him. And he came to see me and said, "Look, we've got to do a concert, and will you do it?" And I was in the middle of a nightmare at the time because I was organising a tour for Bruce Springsteen. I was looking after Roger Waters, who just split from the Pink Floyd and wanted to start his solo career. And we were launching that at Radio City. And then I got, just to add insult to injury, I got a call from Wham's manager, said, "Could you please take Wham to China? I've organised it, but I can't go and you'll have to look after it." And that's enough for me for one day. And so Bob was kind of haranguing me, and I said, "Look, I don't even know if I'm going to get out of China, let alone to the concert. I have no idea what I'm delving into." And I said, "When I get back from China, if I get back from China, because the first time a Western pop band had ever been to China, we'll speak." Sure enough, the day after I got back from China, and it was a pretty successful trip as it turned out, Bob came to the office and started to really push me and said, "We've got to do this and we've got to get on with it." And that's why we had such a short time to put the show together.
Now, on that note, a lot of the people listening or watching our interview weren't even alive back in 1984 and 1985, including Jared, our marketing guy here, who actually inspired me to reach out to you and Joe. It probably hasn't sunk into people that this was way before the days of email and the internet, which begs the question, how the heck did you pull it off in such a short period of time?
Much better, much easier, very focused. Landline phones and something called a telex machine. We didn't even have fax machines. They had only just been talked about. Telex machines, you type into a ticker tape, the tape would transfer over the landlines and come out the other end as about a 2-foot wide sheet of paper and print out what you had to say as text. That was it.
Dare I say, I remember that back in the day.
And it worked.
Yes,
unlike
very
today,
well.
Where we have technology where they can tell you what you've had for breakfast before you've had it, and it doesn't work.
So when I first reached out to Joe Cannon, who I understand is the trust's manager, I explained to him that aside from the great music and dancing and the story, that the play actually inspired me to revisit some of the goals which I first set out for myself back when I started my business over 30 years ago regarding charities and helping others, be it time or money. Was this a message that the producers tried to get across in the play, or is it just myself and the way I think?
Yeah, to their credit, they tried and have tried quite successfully to tell the story behind the story, because clearly there's a backstory here. It wasn't just about putting on a concert. And post the concert, of course, the real work started. Our original target when we started the concert was £1 million. And the night before, Bob and I finally spoke about 2 o'clock in the morning the night before the concert and thought we could raise 5 million. And of course, we raised 140 million. That's proper money. And then we had to figure out, how do we get food, medicines, and whatever was necessary out to the people that needed it as fast as possible. And that was a challenging task. And we really had to, the one thing, Bob and I are good friends or whatever, he's yin and I'm yang, and neither of us give up. And there isn't a word no in our vocabulary. So we ended up buying a fleet of trucks because the trucks were controlled by a cartel, and they were charging so much money to move the goods once they'd arrived in Africa from the port that it didn't make any sense, and so on. So he said, "Okay, screw you, we'll put our own fleet." So we went to Mercedes and we bought a fleet of trucks, which they shipped out for us. And then we got it going, and we didn't charge for it. But we were learning on the hoof. We set out a couple of precepts which have gone all the way through. One is we will work with all the NGOs, non-government organisations that are already in the field, whether it's Oxfam or Save the Children or Medicine Sans Frontières, whatever it is, they're already working there because they're the experts. But we will only give money to projects. We don't fund overhead. And we need to know that those projects are being handled by the local population. So if we're building a well because they need water, the local population have to be trained and know how to operate it once the NGOs are gone. That was very, very important to us and is to this day. So there's been no overhead whatsoever to this charity that we thought would last 3 months, other than the audit that we have to do legally to present. That's it. We don't pay anybody. We've never even taken the price of a bus ticket out of it, and we stick very carefully to the fact that we will only give 2 projects, and we've funded hundreds of them.
Very well done. Now, during my conversation with Joe, and I think I had even sent you this in an email, I told him that I think the organization Band-Aid Trust has a problem. Well, let's not use the P word, let's call it a challenge. Specifically, when I told a few of my colleagues and employees about the show and what it was about, anyone under the age of 45 that I spoke to looked at me with a blank look. When I mentioned the song, some of the people think they've heard of it, but unless I mention Freddie Mercury's epic performance at the concert, some would say maybe the best rock performance ever. None of these folks have any idea about Live Aid. As the trust is now 40, if it's going to continue successfully doing the work that you, Bob, and the others have set out to do, what are you going to do to keep it going strong?
It's a good question. I mean, in truth, we wanted to raise the issue, make the awareness globally, raise a sum of money, get the money out there as fast as possible, and shut down. But unfortunately, because of wars and because of climate change, the situation in Africa, in that belt, we're limited to what's called the Sahel region, which is the belt that runs from Sudan all the way across to Ethiopia, Chad, Mali, and Eritrea. And the climate there is really extremes. When it's dry, it's really, really dry. And when it rains, because the ground is so caked, the rain goes to the surface, it doesn't naturally sink in. So it destroys all the crops. So you get a double dip, which is a problem. And therefore, we're still needed to donate money. We don't go out of our way to do fundraisers. We're not here to be an ongoing charity forever, but people still give us money in their wills. We still get donations, and of course we get royalties. We get a lot of royalties. So we're distributing today on average about £7 million a year, and as it comes in, we have no shortage of projects which we've already evaluated of what to give and who to give it to. And we still have the same basis that it has to go to the project and not the overhead. And we give it out as soon as we're aware of what's needed and where. So that now extends to medical centres, extends to schools, a bit of education and so on, and helping people to get out of this mess they're in. But it's still a problem.
Now, I know you said that you were going to close it down after 3 months, and 40 years later, things are still going strong. Has anyone ever thought of redoing the song with today's performers?
Well, we have. Trevor Horn, whose studio and was the overall producer of the original Do They Know It's Christmas, re-edited and remixed it, put it out before Christmas. It went out, it did really well. It's raised a bucket load of more money. The show, just for one day, we expect to get about £1 million out of that in royalties. So the things are continuing all the time. And you mentioned about young people not knowing about it, but interestingly enough, in December 23, we were told that we'd hit 1 billion streams of people watching the show. So, and that's now probably 1.5 billion streams. So there's no question about it. People still know about it. But
Interesting.
we're not here to be a self-perpetuating charity. We're not here to, that wasn't the object of the exercise, and still isn't the object of the exercise. We only stay open because we keep receiving money. That's the only reason we're there.
Hey, that's a good issue, a good problem to have. What about the concert? Can it be done again? Should it be done again?
I don't. I think today's marketplace is so different than what it was when we did Live Aid, and then 20 years later we did Live 8. Live 8 was to lobby the G8 list of countries and the leaders to put Africa on the map because they'd never discussed it before. And we ended up really, the whole idea of Live 8 was a lobbying exercise, and thank goodness it worked. And they did put Africa on the agenda, and they did forgive a lot of the debt, which was killing the countries themselves. So there are different ways of doing it, but today's marketplace, I can't see it. Life's different. All artists want to know today is where's my sponsor, who's the brand I'm promoting, and how much. That's it.
Well, it's funny. I'm
And
going to
it's a
ask you. I
very,
want to go through a couple more questions about
yeah,
performers, but that's something that I wanted to touch on. Now, first of all, I have to ask. I mean, many people to this day still feel that Freddie Mercury's performance at Live Aid is the most epic rock performance ever. You've worked with a lot of acts, a lot of bands, a lot of individuals. What are your thoughts? Are there any particular performances that stand out in your mind, either in Live Aid or elsewhere?
it was. It was transformative, that performance. And it
Yeah.
was funny because I'd worked with Queen, and I chose how the show worked and the running order. And I knew that I needed a band at that time of the late afternoon, early evening. And most big open air shows, if they start around midday, by the time they get to the late afternoon, people are quite tired, and then it picks up when you've got, the towards the end of it. And I needed something to pick the audience up, and they were absolutely spot on. And Freddie, who really wanted to close the show, and I said, "No, you'll be much better off here. You'll have it on your own." He took the opportunity and did the performance of a lifetime.
Wow.
But so did everybody else that performed on the show. Everybody went that extra mile, whether it was David Bowie or Bono, or whether it was Mick Jagger and Tina Turner, or whatever it was. They all went that extra mile because they knew why they were doing it. It was fairly unique. It wasn't the first big fundraising show to take place, but it was the biggest global event. And the thought of playing to 1.5 billion people in literally while you were on stage somewhere or the other was pretty amazing. And the coup
So
de grace was, of course, Phil Collins, who didn't want to do it. And I got hold of his manager as a friend of mine. And I said, "Tony, you've got to get Phil to do it." And he said, "Well, I'll think about it." And then he called me up on a Friday afternoon and he said, "Well, okay, Phil will do it if he could play both shows because he'd like to play both." I said, "Okay, done." And then I thought, "And what do I do now?" So, as it happens, I got hold of British Airways. They had Concorde. I said, "I've got the best PR stunt you could possibly think of for Concorde." They loved the idea. I said, Phil will go on the thing. We'll fill it up with press and you'll be the heroes. And they just came to the table brilliantly. And Phil played at Wembley, got in a helicopter, went to the airport, jumped on Concorde, and arrived in Philadelphia. Landed in JFK, got on another helicopter, arrived in Philadelphia, went straight on stage. How about that?
Remarkable. And it's interesting. I mean, aside from the fact that I love Phil Collins, and of course the drum solo that he's known for, I believe there's a bit of a Toronto connection with Phil Collins. I believe he supports. There's a charity. It's called People's Players Theater, and I don't even know if it's still in existence, but they put on shows with I guess the color and the light. You can't see the
Right.
performers, and I believe he went to one of the shows many years ago and has contributed
Well, he
and
was a child
sponsored.
actor, so he
Absolutely.
was used to it. Yeah.
So
So
yeah, I think you got ahead with one of my questions. Is that I was going to ask if there's any particular performers that really stepped up to the plate that went above and beyond, and I guess aside from Freddie Mercury and like you said, Tina Turner and of course Phil Collins, I guess they pretty much all did.
they all did. Yeah. I mean, the only thing I have to say, we rise to the challenge. The only thing I couldn't work out, we David Bowie and Mick Jagger were determined to do a duet together, and because of the difference between how fast sound travels and how fast light travels, you couldn't do it in the normal way. So we had a long, long discussion about if one of them could go up in a rocket and and do the song from the other one. And it was so great. We called up NASA, and NASA thought, "What a cool idea! We love it." And they were really trying to figure out how to do it. We
Wow,
didn't have the time to pull it off, unfortunately.
amazing.
But
Now,
that's how it was then. It really was. People wanted to help, realized the gravity of what they were doing. The concert was one thing, but what it was all about is the other issue, and that was so important. And it shocked people. People just didn't know. Today, it's a different attitude of musicians.
well, and I was going to ask you that. Now, you touched on it a couple of minutes ago. I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush, but it
Yeah,
seems that these days celebrities only get behind a cause if it benefits them. You've been in the music industry, you've been in the entertainment industry for quite some time. Was it different back then? Was it different 40 years ago?
um, if you were a rock act, the idea of being associated with a brand was an anathema. I mean, you just wouldn't do it. Today, if you don't have a brand, your manager's fired in 6 months. Um, it is totally different. And of course, I can't paint everybody with the same brush. Of course, there are people that are prepared to help and to do work for causes and come up with their own ideas, and God bless them that they do. But I just do think generally I think it will be a lot more difficult to do an event of this nature.
Interesting. So tell me, as we're getting close to the end today, although again, the mind's still going, I could probably spend 3 hours on the phone with you. How can people support the trust, especially those in North America? I know I went to your website, but any particular suggestions, or is it really just make
Go and
donations? I
see the
think.
show, which is in Toronto at the Mervish Theatre. It's opening in London at the Shaftesbury in May, and long may it continue. And if you really want to give, then you go to the website and try and figure it out. We are our own worst enemy because we don't really make it that easy, because we don't want to have a structured organisation to deal with it, because then we've got to start paying wages. All of us do it for nothing. It takes up 2 to 3 days a week. I have to sign all the checks with John Kennedy, who is the chairman, um, and it's still 2 or 3 days work a week, and it goes
Wow.
on. But people can support. Go and buy the record. The record's ready, available. You can buy the vinyl version of it. You can buy the super mix of it. Go online and watch the show. You can stream it. I think it costs £1 or something. It's not much money, but nevertheless, you could do that. So there are ways if you really want to follow it, and look at the history and do your own thing.
Excellent. Listen, we're going to put the Band Aid Trust's website information on the screen, and you've given them a few different viewers, listeners, some ideas. So leave it with us to help toot your horn.
Thank
Um,
you.
Harvey, it's been truly, truly a pleasure speaking with you today. And aside from learning all about your amazing career, it's been great to learn more about the Band Aid Trust and some of the stories that you told. I wish you and all the others all the best and continued success in the years ahead. On that note, I want to thank everybody for watching another episode of SQM Picks. Since we're always on the lookout for companies and organizations that provide outstanding customer service anywhere in the world, if you know of any that you would like to nominate, please send an email about the business to sqmpicks@sqm.ca. Thanks again for joining us, and look for another company and organization to be featured on SQM Picks shortly.